Welcome to Emotional Intelligence, Part 2. We are talking with Dr. David Caruso, PhD, and I will introduce him again just in case you didn't turn into Part 1, where we sort of went into the definition of emotional intelligence and we got to do a little exercise on how I was feeling during that podcast. Dr. Caruso is a management psychologist who develops and conducts emotional intelligence training around the world. He co-authored the Myers-Salovey-Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test, which is an actual test to see, what someone's ability level is in emotional intelligence. And he co-wrote several books, including The Emotionally Intelligent Manager. That's a great book for managers, but really anyone who's a leader. And I think we're all leaders in at least some area of our lives. That was with Dr. Peter Salovey. And he wrote A Leader's Guide to Solving Challenges with Emotional Intelligence with Lisa Reese. That book is awesome. I love it. It's one of the reasons I love it is because it's actually very short and it's easily digestible multiple times. I've read it multiple times. He's also published dozens of scientific articles on intelligence and has managed people and teams of professionals, as well as 14 Little League teams. He's been married for 40 years and has adult children and 4 grandchildren. Welcome to Dr. Caruso.
Thank you, Dr. Ko. Thank you so much for having me.
I mentioned this last time, but we're going to go on a first name basis just to be more casual. And if you listen to the last episode, we touched on compensatory strategies and how really to manage your emotions, how to do that better. David touched on the mood map. Can you go into a little bit more detail with that mood map?
Sure. Many years ago, probably 25 years ago, we first started to do some emotional intelligence training. And I would ask people, how are you feeling? And they would say, actually, Christine, how are you feeling right now?
Last time I said good.
Well, that's probably the modal response. Good, fine, okay. And when someone says that, what have you just learned about them?
Like nothing.
Yeah, nothing. I mean, you could be, what does that mean? And I think the reason, again, this is very cultural, right? There are some cultures where it is a question. In the US, it's usually not a real question. So first of all, do you ask how you are as a question, or is it just a social nicety? But even when you ask it as a question, you need the vocabulary, right? I'm sort of like, I'm all right. That's different than good, or is it? In psychology, for decades, people who study emotions talk about affect, and there's 2 dimensions of affect. How much energy you have, psychologists call it activation, and how pleasant you are, valence. But if you go to an audience saying, let's look at your activation and valence scores, it doesn't really, resonate with them. So I put it in a graphic format, put some numbers to it, called it energy and pleasantness, called it a mood meter for decades. I switched the language a little bit. And I simply ask people right now, how much energy do you have, 0 to 10? How pleasant are you, 0 to 10? And we start with that. And then as they get a little better and used to it, we then overlay words onto those that mood meter and mood map. Because people are really complicated, right? You're not just 2 numbers. You can feel what we call mixed emotions as well. So it's a great way to have this conversation. Give people the chance to answer and give them the language to answer with.
As you just said, you really need a vocabulary to accurately describe how you feel before you can also kind of know how you feel. In the last episode too, you kind of said, you asked me how I was feeling about the podcast and I said good. And then you pushed me a little bit. And so I gave a number. I said 7.5. I found the next question you asked me very interesting where I said, well, how do you get to a 10? Dial up or dial down according to maybe what I think is needed for a given situation.
Yeah. One thing about that is a lot of people assume that you always need to be in that 10-10, space. It's not possible, but it's also not helpful. There's a lot of work which is facilitated by lower energy and even being unpleasant, where you're focusing on details, you're finding typos in a document. If you're a diagnostician and you're looking at lab results, that requires incredible focus. And that super high energized, pleasant state, it's not going to help you with that focus. So this is not a call to arms to be always energized and highly pleasant. It's not possible and it's not helpful.
I definitely learned that through reading that second book of yours, A Leader's Guide to Solving Challenges with Emotional Intelligence, because you talk about how certain emotions are more useful emotion for a given situation, like anger,
Mm-hmm.
can help you fix injustice, if you use it properly. When I read your book, I really felt that that was true. When I'm really happy and I just feel like I'm floating away, I'm too energized, I guess, too activated to really think carefully. And so when I take a test, I wouldn't say that I like taking tests. I'm a nerd. So I wouldn't say I'm unhappy, but I don't have that feeling of like floating away where I'm just like daydreaming, and because I need to be calm to
It's a great
focus, as you
example.
said.
Yeah, but let's go back to that energized, happy state. When you came up with this idea for a podcast, well, how are you feeling then? Like, what was the precursor emotions?
Well, so you kind of touched on it a little bit on the last episode, and I wanted to talk to you about it more in this one. When you talked about empathy, you brought up
Mhm.
empathy, and you brought up compassion fatigue. Now it's March of 2022. Everyone, whether you're in healthcare or not, is feeling the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic going on for
Mhm.
2+ years. I think a lot of people are feeling fatigue, or I think Adam Grant's article in the New York Times was very popular where he was talking about feeling a sense of languish. Can you address empathy and compassion fatigue, and whether you're in healthcare or not, how you could use maybe the mood map or emotional intelligence to not burn out, keep going in healthcare and keep going in your life?
I wish I had an answer. This is a profound problem, and no one has an answer for that. And I can't possibly think that I do. But I will think about this, which is social relationships, as we mentioned earlier, are really key to our well-being. One way to enhance those or keep them going is to engage in this kind of conversation. Basically, how are you? And not running through the hallways. Hey, how you doing? That's fine. I don't ask that. I just say, hey, good morning, nice to see you. But when you have a few minutes or some time, engaging in the real conversation of how are you, and then modeling it, and not just always with everything's great, which is, I am not doing well. I'm not sleeping well. I'm not. I had a conversation yesterday with a colleague, and this is how we started. This person's in-law recently died, moved from one state to another, has a new job. And I said, each of these individually is a huge amount of stress. And as you know, stress is additive. And we had a really open conversation. She said, this was, it, and it was welcome because we talked about how we felt, and we didn't just try to hide it. Because when you try to suppress your emotions, and by the way, we should suppress our emotions in a lot of situations. It comes with a cost. And so pick and choose a colleague and the time and engage in this how are you conversation. And I think you might be surprised to hear that people are feeling in a way similar to what you're feeling. And rather than bringing you down, it just helps to validate your own inner emotional experience, which is, wow, other people are feeling the same way. You don't feel like there's something wrong with you, or you're an outcast, or you can't talk about these things. So try it. Try the how are you question when you have time, and
Yeah.
model, be open and be honest for a change.
Having the time to connect really does make a difference, whether it's with our patients or our colleagues, or in a setting like this between me and you. It increases my sense of well-being, like of just feeling good. You're
It's a
right.
it's a connection, right? And we spoke about, and emotions are the core of relationships, and that's how you create and build and sustain relationships. And again, it's relationships which keep you emotionally strong, and I
Yeah.
guess can combat compassion fatigue in a small way, in a really small way.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and there's a key strategy there that don't forget. So when you engage in these conversations, um, you'll hear things that you may not agree with, right? Why are you so upset? How many times do you hear that? You're like, how are you feeling? I'm really angry about whatever. You shouldn't be angry about that. That just is a killer of conversation. It really helps to engage in what they call validation. So when someone shares their feelings with you, that's how they feel. You can't argue with it. You can't argue them out of it. And a classic expression is, I can see how someone might feel that way.
Hmm.
Or paraphrase. So what I hear you saying is that you're really sad because, not that you shouldn't be sad because, it's paraphrasing. This is what I hear you saying, validating them, and that will only enhance that relationship, and might be the first time somebody felt validated as well, that their feelings are their own and they're legit.
For this podcast, a lot of the listeners are pathologists or dermatopathologists who, we work at microscopes. And that's always kind of been nice for me because it's microscope slides don't have emotions. They don't talk back to me. They don't care if I'm running late. They don't care they don't care what mood I'm in, whether I'm happy or sad or angry. Do you think, an optimal emotional climate for decision making, like when a pathologist is making diagnoses as they work at a microscope?
Wow, what a great question. Yeah, and I want to be careful because I don't know what you do. Right. So I'm going to speak in generalities, which is how you feel impacts how you think, your decision making, probably your diagnosis, how you do your diagnostic work. So just keep that in mind that, if you think about our mood meter or mood map and how you're feeling, people highly energized, they're more positive. They may come up with more creative brainstorming ideas, but that lower energy, more unpleasant thing, you're going to find more errors. So my guess is be aware of how you feel and maybe deliberately create different moods and look at your data from those different perspectives, including, is it possible I missed something? And if you're really energized, you can say, nah, this is really great. So bring it down, be in that, what we call the lower left-hand quadrant of lower energy, less pleasantness. What did I miss? What did I miss? Anxiety, generate that anxiety. What's the risk? If I did miss something, how problematic could that be? Well, this is actually a really big deal. So this is not just a routine diagnostic test I'm running. This is a big deal. Be aware of how you feel. These feelings impact your thinking, and just understand how those feelings impact the thinking and ask yourself, is that feeling helpful? Does it facilitate the kind of decision I'm making now? And maybe cycle through those in order to have different perspectives.
Yeah. Thank you. This has been a really thought-provoking conversation for me. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, have conversations with people when you have the time. Share if you're comfortable. Create a shared emotional experience. You will deepen those relationships. It'll help you do your work. It'll help you do it better. It'll enhance your well-being, and it'll keep you from maybe burning out too soon.
Well, thank you very much, David, for joining us today.
Really appreciate the opportunity.